My name is Emily, 29 years old, living in Seattle, USA. I always believed that my family was a strong bond until my older brother Nathan rose to become a successful businessman. While I struggled to make a living as an elementary school teacher, he lived in luxury and luxury. One recent Sunday afternoon, I dropped by my parents' house unannounced and accidentally overheard a conversation that broke my heart. The whispers between my parents and Nathan revealed a heartbreaking secret, leaving me so stunned that I couldn't believe my ears. Where are you reading this story? Share in the comments. And don't forget to like and follow to accompany me on my journey to face and overcome this pain. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in the Seattle suburbs. My family home was not fancy, but it was cozy. It had 3 small bedrooms, a backyard surrounded by an old wooden fence, and a large oak tree where my father built us a log cabin to play in. Nathan, 6 years older than me, was my best friend growing up. Even though we were separated by many years, we slept in the same room until I was 8, when my mother decided to turn her study into my own room. Those years forged a bond that I thought nothing could ever erase. My parents, Margaret and James, were hardworking people. Dad was a manager at a local retail store, often staying late to take inventory. Mom worked part-time at the community library and in the evenings tutored children in the neighborhood in literature. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure we didn't want for anything. Education was a top priority for them. Education is the only thing no one can take away from you, my dad would say every day. From an early age, Nathan was a star in the eyes of everyone, with outstanding academic achievements. He was always at the top of his class, won first place in math competitions for 2 consecutive years, and was selected to participate in the school's gifted student program. I still remember my mother's eyes sparkling with pride when Nathan brought home a medal from the regional science fair. My father often talked about his achievements to anyone he met at weekend neighborhood gatherings. Emily, on the other hand, shone in a different way. Although not as strong in academic subjects as Nathan, I had a talent for drawing. Emotional paintings that would wow my art teacher, and essays that would leave my teachers speechless. I also had the ability to understand and connect with people. My friends often ask me to talk to sad kids or help organize community events. But none of these things seem to receive the same praise as Nathan's academic achievements. Emily, why don't you try to do science like your brother? My mother would gently chide me when I brought home a B+ instead of an A. Those art classes are fun, but they won't get you into a good college, my father would say when I excitedly told him about my art project. I tried so hard, joining a creative writing club, enrolling in advanced classes, hoping to see my parents' proud eyes one day. But it always seemed like a dream that hovered just out of reach. When Nathan graduated from high school as valedictorian, our living room was a museum of his diplomas, medals, and trophies. When he was accepted to Stanford University on a partial scholarship, we threw a big party, inviting relatives from all over Washington and Oregon. "That's my boy," Dad said, his voice catching in his throat. "Go for the big sky." 2 years later, when I got my acceptance letter to the University of Washington to study education, we had a simple dinner at a small Italian restaurant in town. Mom smiled and said it was a practical choice. "Teaching is a stable job." Dad nodded as if comforting me rather than congratulating me. The disparity in how my family received our success weighed heavily on me. But I stood by my choice. Being a teacher, working with young children, it's something that brings me a deep joy and sense of meaning that I've never found anywhere else. Nathan graduated with honors in software engineering from Stanford University and was quickly recruited to join a promising tech startup in Seattle. His company developed a groundbreaking data management application that attracted interest from major corporations. At the same time, I finished my education degree at the University of Washington and began teaching second grade at Crestview Elementary School, a 25-minute drive from my parents' house. My first year as a teacher was a financial challenge. My starting salary barely covered my small apartment, my student loans, and my daily expenses. I often had to subsist on frugal meals, instant noodles, sandwiches, and tutor on weekends to buy supplies for my classroom. While I was crunching the numbers, Nathan's career was taking off. His initial stock awards, once considered a mere incentive, were suddenly worth a fortune as his company was being targeted by leading tech companies. Family gatherings became a stage for celebrating Nathan's achievements. At Sunday dinners, my parents would talk endlessly about his latest developments. Last week, Nathan met with an investor from Valley, my mother said, passing a salad across the table. They're looking at a big investment. I still try to share the little joys of my classroom, like when Mia finally understands double-digit addition, or when Ethan overcomes his shyness to stand up and read aloud in front of the class. But these stories are often fleeting, like a thin wisp of smoke that can't hold my parents' gaze, before they return to the familiar topic, Nathan. Still, I'm genuinely happy for my brother. Nathan has worked tirelessly and deserves what he's achieved. He remains friendly, often asking about my class and even remembering a few students' names. Little things that make me feel a little comforted by the distance between us. When Nathan started showering his parents with expensive gifts, a new smart speaker for Thanksgiving, or a short vacation to a beach resort for their birthdays, I didn't feel jealous, just a twinge of sadness at seeing my handmade gifts next to his luxuriously wrapped ones. My parents greeted the glass jars I decorated or the photo albums of my students growing up with polite thanks, but their eyes never lit up the way they did when they opened Nathan's gifts. "You didn't have to do that, Nathan," my mother said, her voice full of gratitude as she opened the sparkling box. I told myself that their admiration for their expensive gifts was understandable, and tried to push away the emptiness that grew inside me each time. The first time I felt truly embarrassed was at a family picnic on 4th of July, about 4 years after we'd both graduated. Aunt Linda asked about our jobs, and my dad immediately began to talk about Nathan's impressive advancements in technology. "He could be a CEO before he's 35, he announced, his eyes glowing with pride. But when my aunt asked about my teaching job, my mom quickly changed the subject. "Emily's fine, but let me tell you about Nathan's new penthouse in downtown Seattle." Driving home that night, I couldn't deny that something had changed in me and in my family. Nathan's success and wealth, while justified, had created an invisible wall, making me feel increasingly out of place in what I had thought was the safest place in my life. Over the next 4 years, the financial gap between Nathan and I widened with each milestone in his career. The tech startup he helped found was acquired by a major Seattle conglomerate for tens of millions of dollars, making him a millionaire almost overnight. At 31, Nathan moved into a luxury condo in the heart of the city, with large windows overlooking Puget Sound. The furniture was sourced from designer showrooms, and his gleaming kitchen featured state-of-the-art appliances I'd only seen on TV shows about luxury homes. The gray electric car parked in the underground garage was worth more than my 3 years of teaching income. As for me, I share a modest one-bedroom apartment with a college friend, Sarah, in a down-and-out Seattle neighborhood. My 7-year-old Subaru still drives well and gets good gas mileage, but that's the only bright spot in my materialistic life. The apartment is cobbled together from a mix of cheap furniture, some from thrift stores, some from flea markets, and some from family leftovers. The biggest burden remains my student loan debt, $65,000, which I pay off at $450 a month, nearly a fifth of my after-tax income. I had heard my parents say they had set aside a tuition fund for both of us, but the money never found its way to me. When I timidly asked about the savings during my freshman year of college, my father would only vaguely mention economic fluctuations, then quickly steer the conversation in another direction. Yet despite all the financial hardships, I have never regretted my career choice. The moment a student breaks into a radiant smile when he finally understands a difficult concept, that makes all the sacrifices worth it. My small classroom is a world of its own, a peaceful haven, decorated with colorful educational posters I bought myself, and my students' silly but sincere drawings, more precious to me than any expensive artwork. Occasionally, Nathan offered to help me financially. "Let me pay off your student loans, Emily," he said once when he stopped by my small Seattle apartment. "It's nothing to me, but I understand how much it weighs on your life." The sincerity in his voice and eyes was undeniable, but I still refused. Maybe it was pride, that stubborn thing that smoldered inside me. But more than anything, I wanted to be on my own, even if it meant sacrifice. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice from wavering, "but I'll do it. I chose this path and I'm responsible for it. What really hurt me was not the personal financial burdens, but the feeling of being apart from my parents. As their lives became more comfortable thanks to Nathan's generosity, they began taking lavish trips, from vacations to Hawaii to days on the Caribbean. My father even retired a year earlier than planned because Nathan wanted to thank his parents with a big gift. My mother finally renovated the living room, a dream she had cherished for more than 15 years. "You should go to California with the family this summer," she suggested during a weekend phone call, her tone as light as the invitation. "Nathan has booked a house near the beach." The invitation sounded generous and warm, but we all knew that my teaching schedule and my bank balance would not allow it. I could not afford a plane ticket, let alone take unpaid leave in the middle of the school year. These times of being left out of family plans, even unintentionally, left a stinging feeling inside me, like small cuts. They were not deep enough to be noticed, but they accumulated over time, making me feel more and more tired. Nathan's personal life blossomed alongside his career. He met Olivia at a charity event in Seattle. Olivia was the communications director for a high-end fashion house. Elegant, sharp, and exuding the confidence of someone accustomed to living in the spotlight. Their social media photos were magazine-worthy. Glamorous dinners at high-end restaurants, brightly lit art exhibitions, and weekend trips to Napa Valley vineyards. They were the epitome of a successful couple, at once glamorous and ambitious. My parents were immediately drawn to Olivia. "She's absolutely stunning," my mother said after our first meeting, her eyes shining. "Her family has a lot of background. Her dad's a big-time lawyer, you know." Her comment made me think of the unspoken comparison to my boyfriend Lucas. Lucas was the basketball coach at my elementary school, a nice, funny guy who was struggling financially like me. When I introduced Lucas to my parents, they greeted him with awkward politeness. After the meeting, Mom simply said, "He's a nice guy," and moved on to something else, as if that were the highest compliment possible. The engagement announcement was made over a family dinner at Nathan's luxurious apartment, where every detail exuded sophistication and luxury. Olivia's engagement ring sparkled as she showed it off to the family, her smile widening in happiness. "We're thinking about something really special," Olivia said excitedly. "Maybe in Hawaii or on a beautiful beach in Malibu." My mother almost cried out, her voice filled with excitement. "I'd love to help you plan it. I've always dreamed of a big wedding." The excitement in her eyes made me feel like someone had just plunged a thin blade into my chest. When I timidly mentioned that Lucas and I were also thinking about the long term, she just nodded, pursed her lips, and almost immediately moved on to the details of Nathan's engagement party. As if my conversation were just a passing breeze on a sunny day. 3 weeks later, Nathan called with news that brightened my parents' day. "I just bought a new house," he said enthusiastically. 4 bedrooms, a big garden, and a basement game room. Plenty of room for a family. The $2.5 million purchase in a pricey Seattle neighborhood quickly became the topic of conversation, leading to a lavish celebration where every compliment seemed to be directed toward Nathan. That same week, I received news that I had been nominated for the school district's Teacher of the Year award. A quiet but precious moment in a teaching career I was proud of. When I shared this at the party, my dad simply said, "Well done, honey," and then immediately turned to Nathan to ask about the real estate market in the new neighborhood. The difference in their reactions was impossible to ignore. It stabbed me like a small, deep needle. When the guests had all gone, I mustered up the courage to touch on something I'd been holding in all evening. "Did you notice that all you talked about was Nathan's house and not once about my good news?" I asked, my voice cracking as I cleared the plates and tried to stay calm. "Oh, Emily, don't take it so seriously." My mother waved her hand as if to brush away my emotions. "Buying a house is a big deal. Everyone knows that. And the teacher's award, then, it's nice, but it's not a big deal." Her words made my throat tighten. My father sighed, placing the plate heavily in the sink. "No one said you were bad, Emily. But let's face it, Nathan is really doing exceptionally well. We're just acknowledging it." "I mean, we value his success more than yours," I blurted out, unable to hold back. My mother's face tightened. "I was just jealous of my brother. and you taught me better. That night, I left the house with red eyes and a ragged breath in the middle of the night. The first crack in the family picture I had believed to be perfect was visible, a crack that could no longer be mended with silence or sweet denial. Nathan and Olivia's engagement party was held at the Bellevue, Seattle's most exclusive venue, where crystal chandeliers cast shadows on soaring ceilings like a dreamlike light show. Fine wines flowed freely, and trays of exquisite food were passed around by elegantly uniformed waiters, all dishes I couldn't even name. The guest list was long, including familiar faces from the tech world, prominent figures from the upper class, and a few names that had graced the city's social pages. I wore my best dress, a deep blue one bought at an end-of-season sale, and despite my best efforts to smile, I felt as if I had wandered into a world other than mine, amid the shimmering gowns and impeccably tailored suits. I stood silently near the pastry counter, a nameless guest in the glitzy picture. When Nathan approached, he wore the same familiar smile, the smile of childhood that had never been broken. "This is my wonderful sister." He introduced me to the group, his voice full of pride. "You're my only sister," I replied, echoing our old sibling joke. A small spark of light in the distance. We both laughed, and in that moment, I felt something intact. "Emily, Olivia, and I have discussed it," Nathan added, his voice sincere and gentle. "We want you to be our maid of honor." I paused, surprised and touched. Even though our paths were so far apart, he still wanted me to be present on the big day in an important role. "Really? Are you sure? Olivia doesn't have a best friend or sister she would rather choose?" I asked, still stunned. "She chose two other bridesmaids, but they both agreed that you were the perfect fit. You've always been my best friend, Emily," Nathan said, his sincere gaze making me forget all my inner turmoil. A warm feeling spread like a small fire on a chilly night. Not enough to completely bridge the gap, but enough to make me smile. "Then I'm honored," I replied, without hesitation. Despite the smoldering cracks in my family, Nathan was still my brother, and my feelings for him somehow remained intact. The initial excitement quickly faded like morning mist under the hot sun. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I attended my first wedding planning meeting at an upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle, where the menu had no prices, a clear sign that I should not ask for my wallet. My parents arrived in a brand new SUV, a gift from Nathan to my mother on their wedding anniversary, a gesture both generous and aloof. Olivia's family, the Thompsons, entered with the poise of people who had long been accustomed to luxury, every look and gesture suggesting they belonged to a world I had only observed. "We're expecting about 180 guests," Olivia said, setting a thick leather-bound book in front of her, filled with high-end wedding magazine cutouts, exquisite color schemes, and stage-worthy arrangements. "The Maui location can handle that many people, and we've booked the entire resort for 4 days." I choked as I took a sip of water. The entire resort? The question rang in my head like an alarm. Nathan interjected, his voice soft. "We want everyone to stay in one place for the full experience." Olivia's mother nodded in agreement. "The sunsets on the beach there are absolutely stunning, worth every penny." The wedding planner, a charming woman named Claire with a velvet voice, presented a rough budget. I glanced at the total, more than $180,000, before it was passed around, feeling a sinking feeling in my stomach. It was 3 years' worth of my income, for a few days of festivities and flowers. "Now for the wedding details," Olivia continued, pushing a photo toward me. "I've chosen bridesmaid dresses from a designer, turquoise with intricate embroidery. Each one is about $2,800, but Nathan and I are paying half as a gift." $1,400 was still a lot of money, the equivalent of my entire month's rent. And that didn't include hair, makeup, and other expenses that I knew would be substantial. My heart began to pound, a beat no longer of excitement but of fear. Fear that my savings would run out. Fear that I wouldn't be able to cope. "The bachelorette party is in Napa Valley the week before the wedding," one of Olivia's bridesmaids announced excitedly. 3 days, 2 nights in a really nice mansion. A long trip, a few days off from school, and the expenses were mounting exponentially. I felt the room closing in, the air suddenly becoming stuffy, while the anxiety that had been churning around me tightened its grip on my chest. Emily, you look pale. Are you okay? My mother asked, noticing my tension for the first time. I managed a smile, just a little overwhelmed with all the planning. I said, my voice hoarse as if I couldn't quite believe what I was saying. After dessert was served, I gently tugged Nathan's hand and led him to a secluded corner of the restaurant for a private chat. The wedding is going to be really fancy, I said, trying to keep my voice light. But I need to be upfront about my finances. The costs are way beyond my means. The bridesmaid dresses alone are almost 2 months' worth of student loan debt. Nathan frowned, his eyes sad and apologetic. I didn't think about that. Let me cover all the costs for you, okay? No, I shook my head firmly. I don't want to be a burden or an exception among Olivia's friends. I just need to know the costs ahead of time so I can plan, maybe pick up some tutoring. I really should have thought about that, Nathan said, his voice heavy. I'll talk to Olivia about something less expensive. But when he mentioned it at the meeting the next day, Olivia reacted immediately, her lips curling into a wry smile. We've already decided on the designer, she said, her tone uncompromising. The other bridesmaids all agreed there's no changing it. This is our big day and everything's been planned. My parents sat silently, observing the conversation. They didn't offer any support or attempt to lighten the load. The message was clear. Either go with the flow or be left out. That evening, when I got back to my apartment, I felt drained. Sarah quietly made me a cup of hot tea and handed it to me, her eyes full of concern. I'm going to need at least $7,000 just to be at this wedding, I said, my voice heavy as I tallied up the costs. My entire savings will be gone and I'll have to bust my credit card. Why not talk to your parents? Sarah suggested, her voice soft. They seem really enthusiastic about the wedding. Maybe they'll help. They made it clear from the beginning that this was my responsibility, I said, my voice bitter. Plus, they're chipping in for the pre-wedding party, which will probably cost more than my entire year's income. Despite my worries, I gritted my teeth and decided to make it work. I tutored evenings and weekends, foregoing my much-anticipated summer vacation to take summer classes. I postponed my dentist appointment and ignored the dent in my car. Every penny I saved was worth more than gold. Any extra money went into my wedding fund. But the numbers just kept climbing. Olivia's bachelorette party required $450 from each bridesmaid. The deposit for our trip to Napa Valley was due, with lodging costing $1,000. I was forced to withdraw what little money I had saved to buy a non-refundable ticket to Maui, trying not to think about the days of scrimping it would take to come up with it. After nearly half a year of planning and budgeting, I met with the person in charge of booking the wedding guests. She smiled and informed me that the resort in Maui costs $320 a night, with a 4-night minimum. There were other expenses: a welcome dinner, a tour of the island, and a farewell breakfast. On the way to the parking lot, I dialed Lucas's number with shaking hands, tears welling up in my eyes as his voice rang out. I can't go on like this, I choked out, feeling overwhelmed by despair. This is all eating away at my finances. Maybe you should be honest with everyone, Lucas advised softly. There's no shame in admitting that you have limits. But for me, shame was a real cut, especially in my own family. There, money seemed to be the measure of value, and my failure to keep up only deepened the sense of helplessness that had long simmered. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I drove to my parents' house in suburban Seattle to return the RSVP cards for the wedding reception and farewell breakfast. My mom had texted me to remind me to send them back soon, even though the deadline was still a few days away. I wanted to get this done quickly, partly to avoid a drawn-out conversation and partly because the simmering tension from our previous discussion about wedding costs had not yet subsided. The house where I grew up was as quiet and tidy as ever, the front yard awash with bright yellow daisies that my mom had meticulously tended. I used my key to open the door when no one answered, guessing they might be in the backyard. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said, placing my bag on the small table in the entryway. The sound of hushed conversation came from Dad's study down the hall, a room that was always solemn, with its dark wood bookshelves and neatly arranged family photos. It was where Mom and Dad usually discussed important matters. I approached the half-open door, intending to announce my arrival, but stopped short when I heard my name called from inside. "Emily is complaining about the wedding costs again," my father said, his voice low and slightly annoyed. "Nathan, I understand your concern, but you need to be firm about this." I stood frozen, my hand still on the doorframe. "I just think the expenses are too much for her," Nathan said, his voice full of concern. "She teaches, she doesn't make much, and she's still paying off student loans. Maybe we should adjust some of the wedding plans." "Don't worry about your sister," my father said, his voice cold. "This is your wedding. You and Olivia deserve to have everything you want. There's no need to be condescending." "Let Emily handle it," my mother said, her voice coldly matter-of-fact. "It's a way for her to learn how to manage her finances." Each word was like a knife to my chest. They were my parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect both of us equally. And yet in their words, I only felt coldness and distance, as if I were an outsider in my own family. "I can easily cover Emily's expenses," Nathan said, his voice full of concern and sincerity. "It's within our means, and it would take a lot of the pressure off her." "Absolutely not," my father said curtly, his voice as heavy as a hammer. "It would only make her more complacent about her choices. She's chosen to be a teacher, a career she knows won't pay much. Every decision has its price." "But Dad was a huge supporter when I was first starting out," Nathan countered, a hint of resentment in his voice. "He helped me put a down payment on my first apartment and then pay off my student loans. Wasn't that an investment in my future?" "Yes," my mother interjected, her tone as if stating the obvious. "Because we believed you would be a great success. Helping you was the right choice." "What about Emily's college fund?" Nathan asked, his voice starting to shake slightly. "I thought you and Mom had money set aside for both of us?" My heart was pounding so hard in my chest that I was almost certain they could hear it from outside. I'd asked about the fund many times in college, but the answers had always been vague and vague. My dad cleared his throat, clearly annoyed. "We used that money to pay for your master's degree and your first startup. It was the right decision at the time." "Wait," Nathan said, his voice as shocked as if he'd been slapped in the face. "So the money you told Emily we lost in the market crash was actually given to you? Does she know about it?" "What good would it do to tell her?" my mother replied, her voice chillingly cold. "We've helped Emily as much as we could. The market story is the best thing for everyone." My dad changed the subject. "The important thing now is to make sure the wedding is perfect. The Thompsons are investing a lot, and we need to reciprocate their generosity." I stood in the hallway, frozen. Tears welled up in my eyes without me noticing, silently rolling down my cheeks. $40,000 for Nathan's wedding, while I struggled with mounting student debt. The promise of financial aid was now a beautiful cover for a cruel lie, and the truth hit me like a knife to my trust. "I don't think this is right," Nathan said, his voice fading, laced with conflict. "Trust us," Mom replied, her words light but piercing. "Emily will manage, she always has. Being tough will make her more mature financially." I couldn't stand there for another second. I quietly backed away from the door, quickly grabbed my bag and left the house, hoping the sound of the door closing wouldn't attract any more attention. In the car parked around the corner, I burst into tears, my whole body shaking with unnamed pain. The image of a loving family that I had kept in my heart turned out to be just a stage, where all my true emotions were staged and controlled. The ride home was immersed in a mist of tears and dizziness. I had to stop the car twice, not because I was tired, but because my wet eyes could no longer distinguish between the road and the illusion. The buzz of my phone pulled me out of my daze. A message from my mother appeared on the screen. "Have you RSVP'd yet? We're waiting." The emotionless message cut into my heart like a cold knife. How could my mother be so calm after what I had just heard? Was I ever truly a child worthy of love in their eyes? Or had I always been a secondary option? A pale shadow beside Nathan? The child worth investing in? Somehow, I made it to Sarah's apartment. As soon as I walked in the door, I collapsed so completely that she thought I'd lost someone close to me. They lied to me about everything, I choked out, collapsing onto the sofa as the weight of my grief crushed me. College funds, loans, everything. They took my money to invest in Nathan because they thought he was worth more. Sarah held me tight as I sobbed and told her the whole story. Her eyes were red, shining with anger and hurt. That's not how parents should treat their children, she whispered over and over in a heartbreaking refrain. That's not love, Emily. Not at all. That night, I curled up in my blanket, my eyes swollen with tears, my heart aching as if someone had torn it into pieces. All my thoughts were in turmoil. I couldn't make any decisions. The pain was too great, like a raging wave washing away all reason. I could only lie still, silently drifting in the feeling of betrayal and regret for a home I once believed was real. For the entire following week, I deliberately cut off contact with my family. I called in to take 2 days off from teaching, something I had never done before, except for the time I was hospitalized with a high fever 2 years ago. My phone started to fill with missed calls and worried messages from Nathan. Emily, are you okay? Why didn't you show up for dinner Sunday? Please call back. We're worried. Hey, what happened? No one knows where I am. I replied with a single text. I need some time. Not feeling well. We'll be in touch. Typing those simple words took all my strength, my fingers shaking as I touched the screen, as if the betrayal itself had seeped into my very nerves. Lucas and Sarah became my anchors in those dark days. They answered curious questions from friends, provided warm meals, and provided the quiet presence I needed. You have to confront them, Lucas said on the 5th day of my isolation. Otherwise, this will stay with you forever. He was right. The conversation I'd overheard played over and over in my head, like a distorted record that blurred cherished childhood memories. Now, every memory was covered with a layer of doubt. Was that trip to the aquarium really about us? Or just to please Nathan? Were my parents coming to see me perform at school out of love? Or just a sense of duty? Was anything about this family ever genuine? Or was it all just a veneer for an injustice that had been quietly perpetuated for years? By Saturday, I texted all 3 of my family members. Tomorrow night, 6:30, I'm the one. We need to have a serious talk. I chose a casual diner in the Seattle suburbs. Modest enough not to add to the financial pressure, but formal enough to ensure the meeting didn't devolve into a chaotic argument. They arrived together, clearly fresh from their parents' house. The waiter ushered us to a quiet corner table where I'd been waiting for 15 minutes, sipping lemonade and silently rehearsing what I was going to say. Emily, honey, we've been worried about you, Mom said first, her voice shaking slightly with emotion, her hand reaching across the table to take mine. I gently pulled it away. I'm not sick, I said firmly. I'm just not feeling well. Dad frowned, his eyes filled with worry and confusion. What do you mean? Your text message made me uneasy. Nathan looked at me, a mixture of tiredness and foreboding in his eyes, as if he had some inkling of what was coming. Let's order first, I suggested, trying to keep my voice even. It'll be easier to talk when the food's here. Small talk about Seattle weather and traffic filled the tense air until the main course arrived. My mother happily went over the details of the wedding, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating off me. The planners in Maui just sent over beautiful table designs, she said excitedly, and the welcome gifts are almost ready. As the waiter placed the appetizers on the table and walked away, I put down my spoon and looked up at my parents. I came by last Sunday to deliver the RSVP cards, I said, my voice even though my heart was pounding. You said you didn't see any, Mom interrupted, her brow furrowing. That's right, I said, my eyes never leaving theirs. Because I left right after I overheard your conversation in your study. I heard it all. About forcing me to pay for the entire wedding myself. About giving my college fund to Nathan. And about how you thought he was a better investment than me. My mother's face paled, her eyes wide with shock. My father stood still, the spoon suspended in his hand as if frozen in midair, Nathan closed his eyes briefly, an expression of pain etched on his face. "You misunderstood," my father said first, slowly setting the spoon down on the table. "Conversations like this need to be put into context." "What circumstances?" I replied, my voice small but unmistakably firm. "Justified cheating me out of my own college fund?" "What circumstances warranted you spending $40,000 on Nathan's wedding, when I had to empty my savings and work nonstop to make ends meet?" "We never promised to pay for everything," my mother said defensively. "Adults are responsible for their own finances." "I'm not talking about the wedding money," I replied, my cheeks burning with emotion. "I'm talking about favoritism, the kind that has been ingrained in the way this family has treated me for years." I emphasized each word. "I heard from you that my parents took my college fund to invest in Nathan's master's degree and his startup." "It's a financial decision, not a favor," my father said, his voice carrying the hard edge of a business decision maker. "It's about investment performance. Nathan's path promises more tangible financial results." His words landed like a slap, blunt, cold, unforgiving, as if my worth were measured by returns. "So in your eyes, I'm just a failed investment, a child not worth trusting?" "We didn't mean it like that," my mother quickly interjected, her voice as if she feared the people at the next table would hear. "We love you both equally, but our resources are limited and we have to make practical decisions." "Limited?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "We just spent $40,000 on a wedding. That could have all but wiped out your student debt. The debt you promised to help you pay off, then quietly reneged on." Nathan finally spoke, his voice soft but clear and steady. "We promised her, Emily. I remember those conversations." My mother glanced at Nathan, her eyes full of warning, but he did not back down. I looked straight at my parents, my voice shaking slightly but not backing down. "You said my college fund was gone because the market crashed, but that was a lie. The truth is that you deliberately chose to bet on Nathan's future because you believed he was a better investment than me." "I just wanted to teach you how to be independent," my dad said, sounding as if I should be grateful. "Nathan's situation is different." "Different in what way?" I asked, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Because he pursued a career that made him money? Because he lived up to your expectations of success?" "That's partly true," my dad admitted, in a rare moment of candor. "We saw great potential in Nathan. Teaching is a respectable profession, Emily, but it doesn't offer the same opportunities as your brother's path." "What opportunity? To make you proud? To give you something to show the neighbors at cocktail parties in the mansion?" My voice cracked, my throat tight with emotion. "Have you ever thought about how I would feel if I learned that the tuition money was taken away not because of my circumstances, but because you believed I was not worthy of the investment?" "You're reading too emotionally," Mom said, her voice cold and judgmental. "Those decisions were carefully considered long ago." "I sacrificed everything just to be at this wedding," I continued, ignoring her denial. "I took on extra tutoring, canceled weekends, and refused to fix my car. I emptied my savings just to buy a plane ticket to Maui. Meanwhile, you and your parents quietly spent $40,000 on this wedding without once thinking about how much you were struggling." "If you couldn't afford it, you should have said so sooner," my father replied, his voice as cold as the wind through a closed door. "No one forced you to come." The indifference in his words seemed to stifle some deep part of me. "Do you hear what you're saying?" I asked, my voice choked but clear. "Do you understand what you're telling your daughter? That I should back out of my brother's wedding because I can't afford the fancy plans this family takes for granted?" Nathan reached across the table, intending to take my hand. "Emily, I didn't know it would come to this. I promise I'll take care of everything for you from now on." "It's not just about the money, Nathan," I replied, and this time my tears couldn't be held back anymore, silently spilling over, wetting my cheeks. "It's about realizing that all these years, my parents have always favored you. They lied to me over and over again and always considered me less valuable because I chose to be a teacher instead of chasing after money and fame." "No," my mother protested, her voice weak and pleading. We're proud of you too, Emily. Really? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. Have you ever expressed the same pride in my accomplishments as you did, Nathan? Have you ever celebrated my accomplishments with the same enthusiasm as you did his? Their silence was like a sentence, heavy, unbreakable. I can't go on like this, I said, setting my napkin down on the table, my hands still shaking. I can't pretend this is a perfect family when it's already been broken. I'm not going to the wedding. I can't stand there smiling and pretending to be happy when I know what you've been doing behind my back. Emily, you're overreacting, Mom snapped back, her voice as sharp as a knife. Have you ever thought about how this will make our family look to others? Face is something that must be maintained. I laughed, bitterness in my throat. Face? What about your daughter's pain? The one who's sitting here saying she's been deeply hurt by your decisions? I stood up, my legs wobbly but my mind clear. I've paid for this meal. Enjoy your meal and have the perfect wedding you've always wanted. I need some distance to see if there's anything left in this relationship worth saving. Nathan stood up. Emily, don't be like this. We need to talk more. Not tonight, I said firmly. I've said everything I needed to say. Now, the choice is yours. I turned and left the restaurant, trying to keep my gait steady, ignoring my mother's call after me and my father's stern voice telling me I was overreacting. Sitting in the car, I temporarily blocked all my family members' phone numbers, a necessary barrier to protect myself from the messages and calls that would surely come. The confrontation was a sigh of relief, but also more painful than I had ever prepared for. I had said everything I had been holding in, not completely broken, but the way my parents reacted made me face my deepest fear. The family I had once considered a refuge turned out to be just an illusion I had created for a long time. The weeks that followed were challenging, but they also ushered in some of the most important changes of my life. With no way to reach me in person, my family fell silent in the face of a wall of blocked phones. Nathan sent an email with the subject line, "Read it when you're ready," but I let it sit in my inbox, unable to bring myself to open it. Sarah became my anchor during the long nights, listening as I drifted between anger, hurt, and confusion. How could my parents do this to me? I cried on a late-night phone call. Did they ever really love me the way they love Nathan? Lucas opened my eyes to another perspective, sharp and heartbreaking. Many parents don't see their children as individuals, but as extensions of themselves, he said one evening as we walked along the Seattle waterfront. When you choose to be a teacher, it doesn't fit the model of success they're pursuing, so they invest less, both emotionally and materially. His words cut quietly but precisely. My parents never prioritized integrity or inner happiness, only achievement, status, and external recognition. Had I spent my youth chasing after values that didn't belong to me, just to be accepted within a false frame of reference? 3 weeks after the restaurant argument, I began seeing a therapist named Laura, who specializes in family issues. My first session left me emotionally exhausted, but also a glimmer of hope in the chaos. Laura explained that my case was typical of a phenomenon called favoritism-driven neglected child syndrome. This often occurs in families where parents, sometimes unconsciously, differentiate between their children. The favored child receives praise, financial support, and looks of pride, while the other children receive conditional love, affection at the expense of meeting expectations. Why does this happen? I asked, sobbing as I fought back hot tears. Why do parents discriminate against their own children? Often it's a reflection of their own insecurities and values, Laura said softly. Parents who place a high value on social or financial standards tend to favor the child who fits that mold. This doesn't necessarily mean they love that child more, but for the other parent, the marginalized child, the emotional deprivation is a real experience. In subsequent sessions, Laura helped me uncover the patterns that had been silently forming since childhood. The double standards my parents set for Nathan and me, the conditional way they offered love, and how I, despite my choice to become a teacher, was still driven by the warped values they held. The important question now, Laura said in the third session, her eyes warm but firm, is what boundaries you're willing to set for yourself to move forward. Healing doesn't mean reconciling in the way your parents expected. That same week, I met up with Chloe, my childhood friend who had been there for me through many of my family's ups and downs. We sat in her cozy kitchen in Seattle, where the morning sunlight streamed through the windows and bathed the wooden table in steaming tea. I hesitated for a moment, then began to talk about what I'd discovered in therapy. Honestly, Emily, I'm not surprised, Chloe said, her hand squeezing mine gently as if to give me strength. I felt it since we were kids. Remember that play in middle school? You were cast as the lead. The whole school was in awe, but your parents barely reacted because Nathan won the engineering award at the same time. You noticed it too? I asked softly, hardly believing that what I had tried to ignore was so obvious to an outsider. Everyone saw it, Emily, Chloe said, her voice soft but firm. My mom and your mom used to be on a community discussion group together. I remember my mom telling Dad that your parents' favoritism toward Nathan was obvious to everyone. She said she felt sorry for you. The confirmation from outsiders made my heart clench, a feeling that was both painful and strange, but also comforting. I was not delusional. I was not creating injustice in my imagination. It turned out that the things I had felt had long existed, had been seen by others. I had just been too desperate for love to admit them. The hardest decision I faced was whether to attend the wedding. My emotional declaration that I wouldn't go suddenly became something that needed to be considered rationally. Did I really want to miss my only brother's big day? Would my absence help me heal, or would it only deepen old wounds? 4 weeks after our argument, Nathan showed up unexpectedly at the door of my small Seattle apartment. When the door opened, we stared at each other for a long, silent, awkward moment. Then he said softly, "Can I come in?" We sat in the modest living room, which seemed strangely cramped and humbled by the presence of him, who lived in a world other than his luxurious apartment and easy life. I've tried to respect your need for silence, he began, his voice low and cautious. But I can't let things go on like this without a direct conversation. I understand, I said, keeping a certain distance in my voice, not sure if this would lead to reconciliation or reopen the hurt. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, an old habit he had since childhood when he was nervous. First of all, I want you to know that I know nothing about the college fund. I always believed that our parents supported us equally. If I had known they were taking your share, I would never have agreed. I nodded, taking him at his word. Nathan might have been remiss, but I knew he didn't mean to hurt me. Second, he continued, his voice softening, I'm sorry for my part in all of this. I should have realized it sooner. I should have wondered why my parents were so willing to fund my every move but so reluctant to address your needs. I was so caught up in my own life that I forgot to look back. I'm not responsible for my parents' choices, I replied, my voice softening a little. I just took what any child would expect from their parents. But I did it without realizing it, Nathan said, his eyes full of regret. I let that bias go unnoticed, and I wasn't strong enough when it came to wedding costs. I knew they were a burden to you, but I let Olivia's ideas overshadow your financial realities. We sat in my small living room for hours, talking endlessly, retrieving bits of childhood memories and casting them in a new light, honestly and unguarded. Nathan began to open up about the quiet pressures he had carried throughout his youth, the unrealistic expectations, the relentless demands for achievement, and the lingering fear that if he strayed from the path deemed worthy, he would disappoint his parents. In some ways, I was more privileged, he admitted, his voice quiet. But you, Emily, you were brave. You broke free from their restrictive values. You chose the path that made you happy, not the path that made them proud. And I sometimes wonder, did I choose this job because I was passionate about it? Or because it was the path with the least risk? The sudden openness from my successful brother left me speechless. Perhaps we both bore the scars of the conditional love our parents gave us, just in different forms. When it came to the wedding, Nathan hesitated. I understand if you still don't want to come, but I really hope you'll reconsider. You're the only one I have. Getting married without you by my side. That would be wrong. I'm not sure I can face them, I admitted, my heart sinking. Just the thought of seeing them makes me choke. I'll talk to them, Nathan offered, his eyes firm. I'll make it clear that they need to respect your boundaries. I'll make sure you have your space, and they're busy with Olivia's family, with their friends. It'll be easier than you think to keep their distance. You don't have to worry about bridesmaids and all that. I told Olivia, Nathan continued, his voice more determined. I'll cover all your expenses. No loans, no favors. Just a gift, between you and me. She's totally fine with it, and it's non-negotiable. I was silent for a few seconds, weighing his words. I still hesitated. If you come, you need 3 things. First, you need financial help from me. Otherwise, you'll be completely devastated. Second, you need to keep as much distance as possible from your parents. And third, Lucas will come with you, as moral support. Yes, absolutely yes, Nathan said without a moment's hesitation. Lucas is on the guest list, and I'll make sure you're seated far away from them. Even though we hadn't worked out all the issues that day, I sensed his sincerity, an effort that wasn't forced, that wasn't hidden. And I agreed to go to the wedding, not because of my parents, but because my brother was trying his best to mend something that had once seemed irreparable. Before Nathan left, I handed him a letter I had written several nights before. I'm not ready to confront them directly, I said, my voice calm but firm. But I need them to understand where I stand and to know what I expect from them in the future. The letter was not an accusation, but an honest, specific, and thoughtful statement. I was clear about the behaviors that hurt me and the boundaries I needed to set in order to feel safe in our family relationship. I emphasized that if they were to move forward with reconciliation, they would need to confront the truth about their bias, apologize sincerely for their past lies, and commit to being more fair. I'll make sure they read every line, Nathan said, carefully folding the letter and slipping it into his coat pocket as if holding something precious and fragile. As I expected, my parents' initial reaction was reserved, even defensive. Nathan recalls that Mom found the letter too emotional, too biased, as if my feelings were something to be avoided. Dad stuck to his old stance, that past financial decisions weren't biased, but simply economically sound. But as the wedding day approached and they realized I was serious about keeping my distance, small changes began to emerge, slowly but clearly. Mom sent a short, simple, yet meaningful message. We miss you at dinner on the weekends. When you're ready, let's talk. Dad left a voicemail, neither raised nor evasive. Maybe, I did something wrong. We'll talk more after the wedding. These words are not a full apology. They are not enough to erase the lingering hurt, but they are the first pieces of something new. An acknowledgement that our family is broken and that perhaps it is time to heal. Fragile and incomplete as they may be, they are a start. 5 months after I had forced myself to face the bitter truth about my family, I found myself on a flight to Maui, my hand clasped tightly with Lucas's as the plane lifted off the ground. Nathan had kept his word. He had paid for everything related to the wedding, from airfare to accommodations, leaving me with nothing to worry about. My bridesmaid's dress, a chic ash pink, was hung neatly in the overhead bag, tailored to fit me perfectly. Despite my hesitation, I had finally decided to attend my brother's big day. Not out of obligation, but because of the bond we were building. Maui was exactly as it was described, awesomely beautiful, a slow-motion film between reality and fantasy. The golden sand was as soft as velvet. The waves lapped gently against the clear sky, and the sunset was so brilliant that my heart skipped a beat. Every meal was a new taste journey, with fresh seafood and local dishes presented like art. In other circumstances, this might have been the most memorable vacation of my life. The main ceremony took place at 4 p.m, under a white floral canopy on the beach. Olivia's 2 bridesmaids, best friends from college, now in banking and marketing, were polite but kept a certain distance, as if they had been warned about the sensitive atmosphere in my family. Still, I was surprised when they invited me to join the preparations, a gesture that was perhaps a hallmark of Olivia, who seemed more understanding now after her frank discussions with Nathan. My parents were a guarded and careful presence at public events. No more prying eyes or unintentionally hurtful words. They respected the boundaries I had firmly established through Nathan and kept just enough distance to not upset the delicate balance. Our conversations were short, polite, and never crossed the line. A stark contrast to the artificial awkwardness that had pervaded family gatherings before. The morning of the wedding, Nathan knocked on my hotel door as Lucas was relaxing on the beach. "Can we talk before everything gets crazy?" he asked, looking surprisingly relaxed in a white t-shirt and beige shorts. We walked along the resort's paved beachfront walkway, the Maui waves lapping gently against the rocks beneath us. After a few minutes of silence, Nathan said, "I want to thank you for coming. Despite everything, thank you for not letting your broken parents tear us apart." "It wasn't easy," I replied, my voice low, my eyes fixed on the horizon. "But I understand that if I turned my back on you because of their actions, I would be the one who would ultimately lose out." Nathan paused, facing me, his eyes shining with rare seriousness. "I've been thinking a lot these past few months about fairness and about the privilege I've been given. I realize I've been unwittingly enjoying the favoritism of my parents without ever questioning it." "I never asked for special treatment," I said softly, trying to ease the guilt in his eyes. "But you let it happen without a word of protest," he said, his voice hoarse and sincere. "Now I want to do something, even a little, to make up for it." He handed me an envelope, his hand shaking slightly. Inside was a bank statement in my name, with a balance of $65,000, almost enough to pay off my entire outstanding student loan debt. "Nathan, I can't take this money," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. He held up his hand, stopping me. "This isn't a gift, Emily. This is justice. The money was meant to be yours, for college. But my parents gave it to me, and I spent it without even realizing it. Now I'm just returning what was yours." Tears welled up in my eyes, uncontrollable. "This changes everything," I choked out, feeling the financial burden lift from my shoulders for the first time in years. "You deserve a fresh start," he said softly. "Use the money to pay off debt. Invest in your future, whatever you need. No strings attached, no expectations." We hugged each other in the middle of the sunny road, the sea breeze blowing by as a witness to that moment, a big step in the healing journey between two brothers who had been caught up in the cycle of family injustice. Nathan could not erase the wounds caused by bias, but his sincerity and concrete actions were clear evidence of his efforts to rebuild from the broken and to start over with kindness. The wedding in Maui was breathtaking. White chairs were neatly arranged on golden sand. The ocean breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and violinists played softly as Olivia walked down the aisle, resplendent in her custom-made gown. Standing beside her as maid of honor, I was swept up in a mixture of emotions. Pure joy at Nathan's apparent happiness, simmering sadness at the family rift, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps something was beginning to change. Throughout the party, I kept my distance from my parents. Not cold, but not too close. Occasionally, I caught Mom's gaze across the hall, a vague one. Was it regret or confusion turning to awareness of the price they'd imposed on our family? Dad came closer to me only once, his wine glass shaking. "Nathan looks really happy," he said, his voice a little lost in the music. "Yeah, he does," I said curtly, not inviting further conversation. "Emily," he continued, his eyes averted, "when we get back to Seattle, maybe we should meet for lunch. There's something I think needs to be said." "That's not an apology," I said quietly, my voice calm but distant. "I still need more time." The rest of the evening passed in a cacophony of laughter, cheers, and spontaneous dance moves under the twinkling lights. Lucas was always nearby, his steady, silent presence a quiet refuge in the swirl of emotions that was quietly unfolding inside me. 3 days later, as our plane took off back to Seattle, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if staring at the pain had finally opened a path to release the weight that had been weighing me down for years. Back in Seattle, life slowly found its rhythm again. With Nathan's financial support, I paid off my student loans and set aside a small portion for long-term plans. The relief from years of financial pressure lifted a heavy burden, allowing me to enjoy the little things I'd previously denied myself. A dinner out without planning, or a new shirt bought just because I wanted it, no reason. 4 months after our wedding, I accepted my parents' invitation to meet at a neutral downtown restaurant. The conversation was awkward, slow, deliberate, with tense moments as we both struggled to defend our positions. But for the first time, my dad acknowledged that my financial decisions had cost me dearly. "We thought we were being practical," he said, his voice full of reluctance. "But looking back, maybe those choices sent the wrong message, that our love was conditional." My mother had a harder time admitting her mistake. She still tried to justify it as the best that could be done, given the circumstances. But eventually, she gave in, her voice shaking slightly as she said, "I never wanted you to feel abandoned." Her hand reached out to me, an awkward but sincere gesture. "But I did," I said, not shying away. "And facing that truth, it's the only thing that can help us start over." Our relationship was still fragile and needed to be rebuilt in small, careful, and patient steps. I maintained new boundaries, clear about what was acceptable and what was not. A few weekend dinners resumed, but less frequently and with quiet rules. When my parents unconsciously fell back into their old habits, focusing on Nathan's achievements as an instinct, I stopped being silent. Instead, I gently reminded them, as a way to protect myself without having to withdraw from the relationship again. Nathan and Olivia also began to actively rebuild their family relationship on a more equitable footing. They held cozy gatherings at home where the conversation expanded beyond Nathan to include my work, interests, and accomplishments. When they announced Olivia was pregnant 7 months after their wedding, they both made a point of including me in every important moment, from the first ultrasound to choosing a baby name, as a gentle way to make sure I didn't feel left out. The most profound change came in a way I didn't expect. A year after our tense conversation, my mother called and asked if she could come to one of my teaching sessions. "I just realized I haven't seen you in class," she said, her voice sincere. "I want to understand more about the world you live in." As she stood in the back of the room, quietly watching me instruct my second graders with focus and gentleness, her expression slowly changed, from curiosity to emotion to rare appreciation. "You're really good with kids," she whispered after class, her voice carrying a note of admiration I never expected to hear from her. That afternoon, a shy student in my class approached me, holding a colored picture. "My parents say my brother is better at studying," he said quietly, his voice sad. "They help him with his homework first." In his eyes, I saw the same old but haunting feeling, of being left behind, of being compared, of not being good enough. Drawing on my own journey, I gently guided him to express his feelings to his parents in a positive way, opening the door for a family conversation that could have stopped the cycle of hurt sooner. "Sometimes parents repeat painful habits without realizing it," I told him. "But if we have the courage to be honest, we give them the opportunity to change." Turning my own painful experience into helpful advice for that boy was the first gift I received after a tumultuous year. Pain, once seen and healed, can become understanding, a small light that helps guide others. My relationship with my parents will probably never be perfect. Some wounds are too deep to ever heal. But we are slowly building a new foundation, a more genuine connection, based on honesty rather than the facades we once clung to. They are learning to see and appreciate me for who I am, rather than forcing me into a mold of expectations or comparing me to Nathan's accomplishments. As for me, I am learning to set healthy boundaries, clear enough to protect myself, but not turning into walls of indifference. Most importantly, I no longer defined my self-worth through the validation of my parents. These harsh truths forced me to develop a more resilient self-esteem, an internal sense of worth that was not measured by anything other than my own passion and worth. Teaching remained the fire in my heart, the purpose of my life that I chose and pursued, regardless of what others thought. A new intimacy has developed between Nathan and me, deeper and more real than ever before. What was once a superficial harmony maintained by avoiding difficult truths, has been replaced by a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. He is still my brother, my friend, and now my ally in building a new kind of family, one where feelings are heard and people are accepted for who they are. Looking back, I realize that sometimes it is the painful truth that opens the door to liberation. Hearing my parents coldly tell me that I must take responsibility seemed like a cruel push, but it turned out to be the turning point that helped me escape the illusions that had imprisoned me for so many years. Have you ever had to face an uncomfortable truth about your own family? How did you navigate those conflicts, maintaining your boundaries without losing that precious connection? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonates with you, please support me by liking and following me for more stories about healing and growing from brokenness. Always remember, knowing your worth is not selfish. It's the foundation for any authentic relationship. Thank you for coming along, and I wish you strength and clarity as you seek authentic family connections.